Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from today, and welcome to this Agile Business Webcast Series broadcast, enabling business agility with DevOps and Agile ALM. This webcast is brought to you by CMC Media and is sponsored by CollabNet. I'm Patrick Egan, publisher of the Agile Journal, and I'll be your moderator today for this session. In a few moments, Paul Peissner and Julie Byrne will join us to discuss the DevOps dilemma and describe how companies are enabling business agility with DevOps and Agile ALM. But before we begin, let me take care of a few housekeeping details. Our livecast environment is intended to be completely interactive, so you'll have the ability to post a question throughout the broadcast or chat live with other attendees about the session. Just use the live chat window that you can see directly below this webcast window. You can also undock the chat box from the screen using the pop-out button at the bottom right corner of the screen. This way it won't get hidden behind the slides. Also, if you need to download a copy of today's presentation, you can click on the Resources tab over on the right side of the screen. You'll see a copy of today's presentation as well as any other materials that are available for this session. Also, a complete recording of today's presentation, including the Q&A, will be available within about 24 hours after the session. Also, we'd like you to follow along with your friends at home, so you can use the Twitter and Facebook buttons at the top to share your thoughts about the presentation. Don't forget to use the Agile LC hashtag in your tweets if you want to join us in the tweet roll that you can see over on the right side of the screen. You'll see everyone else's tweets roll out there as well too. Also, if you ever need to get a closer look at any slides, you can just click just mouse over the screen in front of you, and gotta catch up with my slides here. And then you can click on a full screen button that you'll see in the middle of the presentation window. So let me introduce our speakers today. Paul Peissner is the Director of Business Development for CollabNet, and Paul has spent more than a decade of promoting business and IT productivity in the enterprise software space, leveraging platform strategies with innovative partner offerings to create the best-in-class solutions. More recently, he's been involved with BSM and ITIL initiatives, managing the partner ecosystems for BMC and enabling partner products to create innovative solutions. In 2010, Paul co-authored a submission for a BSM methodology in the IT systems management market that leveraged his knowledge of market trends and the use of multiple BMC technologies. Today, Paul is managing CollabNet Partners as Director of Business Development and is an advocate for DevOps. Also joining us will be Julie Byrne. And Julie has spent she's the product manager for CollabNet, and she's spent over 5 years in the software configuration management and application lifecycle management space, performing consulting and training to help organizations improve their process throughout the efficient use of software development tools. Julie joined CollabNet in 2008 as a senior solutions consultant, helping enterprises evaluate and implement TeamForge, and transitioned to a marketing role in the beginning of 2010. Julie has a PhD in applied math from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. Well, welcome, Paul and Julie. And I know that the big question on everyone's mind here is, what is DevOps all about, and what can we do about it? So, Paul, if you want to take over, I think the floor is yours.
Thanks, Patrick. I appreciate that. I'm not quite sure if I've got everything put together here, and I don't know if I can answer that question for every organization or every person online here, but definitely would love to explore what DevOps is in the early stages as this initiative starts to mature. So again, Julie and I are going to try and answer any questions you may have, and we'd like to get started here. Let me see if I can get this thing to go down. All right. So CollabNet's been watching the market for about 11 years. We've seen a lot of changes out in the marketplace. We've seen a number of trends. At the bottom of the trends have really been focused on the business benefits and lowering the cost, especially in the application lifecycle management world. We've seen distributed teams all over the world emerge as a trend for cost-saving, outsourcing the development, also outsourcing a lot of functional roles for organizations. While the tools and the selection of the tools have really been focused on the individual players, a tool that is stable for those teams and have not really been part of that strategy as they go global, they've tended to use tools that were really not designed to be distributed. And the processes and the management didn't really follow the distributed teams out there. So what we found was an interesting trend where through consolidation, mergers, outsourcing policies, and the demands of the business, there's been this big push to go global, and yet the tools and the applications and the processes really weren't designed to follow the process itself. Likewise, we have a myriad of tools, especially in the ALM space, where individual organizations, teams, and even individuals within those organizations have a decision-making capability to choose tools in a very random process that may work for them but don't necessarily work for the benefit of the organization themselves. And so we see the emergence of DevOps starting to address that more holistically in terms of what it's trying to accomplish for the business. Now, again, we're talking about from the ALM perspective. In our space, where we see developers making decisions about the tools that they need, they're looking for best-of-class tools that really drive or make them the most productive. And in those cases, they're looking for stable products that make them as efficient as possible as a developer with the focus on the projects that developers tend to work on. We then have managers who are looking more collectively at the team of developers that tend to want to put together a best-of-class policy-driven platform that allows the team to work more efficiently together so that the productivity of the team and the predictability of their project management is more managed. It stays in budget. It manages to timelines and expectations of the handoff process. And the most important thing from a team manager is visibility as well as predictability in terms of managing those teams of people and the projects that are holding up the business from growing. Then we finally have the CXOs. In those cases, many of those in the current environment are really cost-driven. They're looking to lower the cost and improve the efficiencies of the organization. The productivity gains, the predictability of the organization are important, but the central concern in today's market has really been about lowering costs and improving the efficiencies. And in those cases, we see decisions for standardization and policy-driven platforms that allow organizations to build multiple strategies on top of those stable platforms themselves. So we start to get into a DevOps conversation. We tend to have three groups of an organization, and for us, we're going to do what we call just kind of the round-trip visit to a DevOps kind of a DevOps strategy. In this case, we have at the top of the pie is the business, and the business is looking for efficient services. They're looking for system availability always be on and the flexibility to create new projects as market opportunities arise. So what does that look like from a DevOps perspective? There's a lot of disciplines in terms of how a business takes an idea, vets it out, turns it into a project, how a project turns into a development effort, how the development effort gets qualified for release, and how the ops teams will take a project and roll it in as a supported asset that then delivers back the services. What we have is kind of a confusion on the DevOps vision, primarily because the three groups are really driven by three different underlying languages. Businesses really look at delivery of services to grow their business, to make themselves more profitable. IT operations teams tend to look at the asset management and the configuration management capabilities to deliver the system availability that the business depends on. And the project teams tend to measure everything in terms of, obviously, projects that have both a start date and end date. Every one of those teams has what we call the silo agenda that drives their core business. And what we're looking at DevOps is understanding the correlation or how they touch each other in the broader sense of what we're trying to accomplish. So if we go to the next slide here, we're going to walk you through what we'll call a quality-driven business agility. And this is typically how we are impacting each other without ever realizing the limitations of a siloed approach to each of the disciplines itself. When we talk about an ALM-enabled DevOps conversation, we're talking about an essential part of the whole DevOps story, but really focused on the project side, which is where CollabNet has historically been a leader in the marketplace in terms of accommodating the current market environment. What we have in the process is the business has historically had many ideas coming to IT. So in an average enterprise, Gartner tells us that it's not unusual to find between 2,000 and 70,000 requests for changes on a monthly basis in the enterprise space. Those are folks that are in business looking for ways to be more efficient in their roles themselves, and they typically will put in requests for changes or modifications to the current product offerings and or the current services that are available to them. And they have an endless list of ideas. Now, it's the job of the organization to vet that out, to consolidate some of those, to align those with corporate initiatives to either fund them or not fund them. But in a raw request environment, the business has historically overwhelmed IT with the number of requests that they have on a regular basis. But when you look at the project management piece, even with the best quality processes in place, you typically have a real challenge in getting those innovative ideas rolled out to IT operations in a way that is going to benefit the business. Again, Gartner tells us that it is not unusual to find that 80% of a well-tested, well-developed, policy adhered to project, when it gets introduced, will cause failures of one kind or another for the ops teams. And those failures on release can be anywhere from user abandonment, misalignment with the expectations of the business themselves, the surge on the service desk because of the confusion when it rolls out, as well as the IT support teams trying to manage the application and its impact on the data center and or keeping that service availability up and running in an environment where it may be a hybrid. So you've got a number of things that historically can go wrong, and traditionally 80% of the time they do go wrong. And so there's a concern about the handoff process between the two disciplines, dev and ops, and 80% of the time there is a painful impact to IT ops that IT development may not be aware of. In many cases, as soon as they're done with their projects, they go back to start a new project, and they leave IT to go out and to solve the continuing support. Now, from an IT operations side of the house, the average enterprise user believes that IT ops is under-delivering on critical business services. About 40% of the business organizations believe that IT does not do its job well. And that's consistent. In some cases, it may be higher or lower depending on the impact that service availability and the efficiencies that the business is hampered by relative to the IT services that are delivered by ops. And again, ops can't really do anything about it if the project, when it's in design, is not designed to fit in their environment or is not designed to fit into the business current practices. So what we see in final motion here is the siloed approach to each of these three pockets and the maturity levels inside those organizations. While they are very efficient themselves as standalone entities, they're very inefficient in terms of how those entities interact with each other. And the transitions between those processes can either be very painful or they can be gracefully aligned with each other. And in many organizations, some of the handoffs are very well coordinated. In other organizations, it's very much a kind of a haphazard way in terms of those handoffs taking place. So if we want to focus on the business, when we talk about the round trip, the business only sees one IT organization. The one IT organization that they see out there historically has two parts to it, though. From an IT ops perspective, they just love instability, and I'm being facetious here. The business really struggles when the system availability and the services are disrupted. All the business wants to see is a quick fix, and they don't want to see disruption to the business activities. They're looking for efficiency gains, and they just really get frustrated when services are disrupted, and it's very unpredictable. It can really take a toll on both the IT ops reputation as well as the business's ability to grow. On the other side, the business wants from IT apps or IT development efforts is the idea to turn a business concept into an application through a project quickly and efficiently. And again, there's been a whole push in this space there's never an end of ideas that the business will throw at the project teams, but how quickly can you turn those project ideas out there? So at the end of the day, what we have is a business that has this really strange relationship with IT. On one side, they have to have service availability, undisrupted services. On the other side, they're continuously throwing requests for changes at the project side of the house to be more efficient and to get those efficiency gains introduced to the operations. And you can start to see where there's a real challenge for IT as it responds to the business. Now, relative to development projects, there's a couple things that they want is they want to hear from the business once. They don't like getting changes. Feature creep, change of requests, all of those functionality pieces, that is not something that makes a development team very efficient. They want to get a requirements list, both technical and business needs, and then really drive to get those projects introduced and out the door in terms of efficiency. And there's a lot of push to become as agile as possible with those requests coming in from the business. And again, those changes, the requests for changes are coming in the enterprise space, somewhere between 2,000 and 70,000 change requests a month. And somehow the business team has to be able to get some of those projects rolled into development, and development has to get these things rolled out as supportable assets over to the IT ops side of the house, which leads us to another challenge. From an ops perspective, development does not like it when there are technical or environmental changes. When services and the common services that are required for an application to function well, when those are changed for security reasons, for optimization reasons, and that information is not systematically rolled back to development, that becomes a real challenge. The data center is always responding to crisis situations, the firefighting roles of ops, to keep the data center proficient and efficient, always making changes to optimize and to address the security concerns that may be a challenge for the organization. There's a big push to make sure that those changes to the operational environments are transparent or visible to development teams. But in most cases, we know 80% of the time there's something that is left out. There's some details from the point the project got started to the number of changes out in the data center or out in the cloud. There's a lot of things that have happened. And dev tends to think that whatever they get finished should just be adapted and adopted into operations to get it going because the business needs to have it. So there's an unrealistic expectations that operations can add or make changes to their environments if there's an innovative project that's being rolled out. And that's a challenge for organizations that are trying to be innovative for the business and then having to live with the limitations of the IT organizations themselves. So what does IT ops look? What are they looking for from the business? They love complaints. They love to hear how terrible they're doing. And so historically, there's been a lot of money spent on do-it-yourself, fix-it-yourself kind of environments. They're just trying to avoid the impact of those distracting comments that keep them from fixing the real problem. And so you see a lot of self-service, self-healing capabilities on the service desk side of the house. There's a lot of buffer tools. Find it yourself, fix it yourself technologies have been kind of a very cost-efficient way of getting those answers to the end user and getting the end users to solve those problems themselves. From the dev teams, what they're really looking for is not much. They would actually prefer nothing to come from the apps teams, because every time the application teams roll out a new project, it disrupts the efficiency of the organization. And in many organizations, they've put on a lot of policy controls in terms of slowing down or controlling or minimizing the number of changes that can be introduced in operations just to keep the system's availability issues from being challenged by the introductions of new things. Now, the reality isn't the new projects that are rolling out. The reality is that the data center is constantly in a state of flux or dynamic and making changes that are appropriate for the business. And the development teams are typically not given that visibility into the organization. So ops would like to know when there is something new coming down the road, what do they need to do to staff up and prepare for that? Again, what we're going to do quickly here is just talk about the two core disciplines that are driving. So between business and operations, there's this thing that has been driving the organization for over 20 years, ITIL, and the product discussion around ITIL is BSM. So BSM is the strategy in terms of how you make your organization system availability stable, the services continuously flowing. and how do you avoid disruptions. And they put a lot of emphasis on the policies to stop or to avoid disruptions. And how that translates in many organizations is they stop the quick rollout of innovation. Now, between the business and the development teams, there's been this new phenomena of Agile. So this Agile ALM effort is really designed to take development projects from very long windows of development with very complex stacks and to simplify the builds in such a way that those projects can go from concept to release in a very short period of time. In fact, the ideal environment for many of our customers have gone from 2 years to 9 months, was 2 years down to 9 months, down to 90 days, and in some cases we see 60 days, and there's a couple of cases where small composite applications are now being rolled out within 24 hours. So the market's changing in terms of ITIL and BSM, policy-driven capabilities, and the Agile approach to the whole process itself. And that's been kind of a challenge because the organization typically is funding both of those. They spend a lot of time and money talking about changing the culture of the development teams to get those releases sped up, and they spend a lot of time and money talking about locking down the infrastructure environments so that very few changes can come into play and disrupt the organization. This is kind of the core of the two siloed approaches and really what's driving the whole DevOps conversation itself. So DevOps is really going to try to align projects and assets discussions between the two organizations. From a development team, those projects need to be treated as assets from an IT ops perspective. And from a development perspective, those projects are not really complete until the business has them in use and is producing the kind of efficiency and revenue gains that funded the effort in the first place. Both of those are cultural changes, and the handoff between a project and the introduction of an asset in change management has typically been a manual process where a lot of the knowledge is either in a static location and or the transparency between the challenges of the rollout are not very clear to either or both of the organizations. And there's a tremendous amount of knowledge loss every time there's a rollout. There's not an improvement of systems, so there's no consistent process or policy in place to improve it for the next time. Typically, the manual handoffs recreate that same problem over and over again because the disciplines don't have the collaboration tools, the integration, or the communication between them, and the business has no visibility into this manual process itself. So what we see here is as DevOps really drives this quality-driven agility, and what we're seeing is the quality effort really is around managing the source code of the projects and the teams, almost like they're assets and extensions of the operation environments with the same policies and the same accountability, same visibility that every other asset in an organization, in the IT ops organization would have. And again, giving real-time data and visibility to both of those is essential really for making the business more efficient and making the efforts of all organizations more collaborative and really pushing the systems availability and the service availability of all three of the organizations themselves. At the core of what DevOps is really trying to accomplish is really to lessen the impact of IT chaos when an application development effort is underway that is not the right fit for the organization. In the history of our industry, we've seen the assembly line in which certain products just can't be produced because the assembly line cannot accommodate it. It's the same concept that's really driving DevOps. There's an optimal kind of application development as well as sustainability of an application that is ideal for any given environment. And as much visibility into the development effort and into the operational efforts will really coordinate that so that the releases and the innovative introductions of applications won't have a square peg, round hole disruption capability. Really looking for a coordinated effort in which the development process is more aligned on better understanding the operations environments that they're delivering into. So from a customer success story, we have a couple of customers where we've seen them jump from historic efficiency tools for development efforts, like the like the rational investments that had 48 months, and working together with some of the other more collaborative tools, we've been able to push the development teams down to 3-month release cycles. And that's been very beneficial for the business. They've been able to, this is a financial organization in Kansas City where they've been able to turn requests for projects and new revenue streams quickly into services that can be accessed by customers. And they've created a competitive advantage against their in their marketplace by the relatively short amount of time it takes to develop and get a release out there with an application itself. Again, it's not perfect. There are some painful processes. IT operations has historically held this organization hostage for about 3 months before they were prepared to introduce the project. So the projects themselves were getting done in a very short period of time, and then they were being held for what they call the ITIL or the BSM change windows, which could be 1 quarter or even 2 quarters out, depending on the timing of the release itself, which is one of the reasons why we're sitting down and talking about DevOps with organizations that have gained efficiency on the Agile development efforts. With another customer in Germany, this is a success story where they're concerned for system availability issues. They were constantly being hit with outages and disruptions based on the new releases of products that were not designed for their environments. So they took a real proactive approach. They could see that their free-thinking, out-of-the-box teams needed to be a little bit controlled. And so what they did is they controlled the number of conversations that were allowed by putting together a request portal for new services or new projects that be taken underway. Again, this was a portal that was hosted not by the business analyst, but typically by, well, in this case, is hosted by IT Ops. And what it does is it takes the business requests and it puts them within a framework of what is tolerable and acceptable in the current IT architectures or the environments where this application is going to live, and it's going to limit the effect or the impact it could potentially have on all other dependencies or other folks, other applications that may be existing there. So they limit the scope in terms of the kinds of projects that they allow the business to undertake, and they will quickly then take those requirements, the business requirements, and match them up with the technical requirements that are pre-approved by the IT Ops. Again, this is not very common. We don't see this. It's very innovative in the way that they've approached it. As they get more mature, they will allow more of the innovative ideas to get introduced to their environments as they find the system kind of emerge and develop. They then take the project and the scope of work and they put it out to bid to developer communities, and they have a list of over 100 approved development teams that can then respond to the opportunities themselves, and it's sent out by IT Ops. Again, it comes back to IT Ops in terms of the requests. They do a review, and then they put it out, and the development teams then get to talk about the time, the costs, the quality of their work, and IT Ops will then accept it. But what's unique about this organization's response is the fact that they actually will measure this twice. Part of the bid requirements is that the developer team has to test the products themselves, and again, it's like asking the fox to watch the hen house. There are some concerns about the quality of their self-test. But then they run a separate test in the staging area before they get the introductions. And the second test tells them 2 things. First, it talks a little bit about the application, but it also talks about the quality of the team itself. Can this development team be trusted, and should they ever be used again? In many cases, what you'll see, am I still on? Okay, someone's indicating that, okay. So in many cases, what you'll see is Ops measuring the development teams and the testing capabilities of those teams just like they would any other asset that is under management with Ops. And it's a brilliant move on the part of the customer, because what it does, it has improved their system availability issues. They manage multiple cloud environments, and they manage the projects with the cloud location that this application is going to live in, and they remember and measure and reuse the better development teams. They reuse the source code from those application releases when they have no issues, and they're running a much more efficient, a lot less risk involved on the development efforts. So it's a very interesting environment where we're seeing DevOps emerging in a concern for system availability, and they've really driven a whole new solution set themselves. So who is CollabNet? This is a great question because we get it all the time, relative to the big DevOps question, who is CollabNet? Well, CollabNet has really been an organization, a platform for developers, especially for distributed teams around the world, which has been a very an interesting challenge as well as a common practice for the organizations. For CollabNet, we got started 11 years ago, really addressing this trend in the marketplace, and we were there to kind of enable it with a best practice cloud solution. So we've got 5 million end users using our Subversion tools and our development tools that are out there. We have 350,000 subscribers, 7,000 corporate customers. We have a long-standing app dev cloud offering that's 11 years old, dates back, as well as a large community of active contributors to many of the open source projects themselves. The SaaS and on-premise options for the product have really made it an adjustable and adaptable opportunity for customers to really define the solution that is best for them and take on the amount of risk that they have. Again, built around the Subversion foundation that we put out there years ago, the Subversion tool becomes a strategic component for us in terms of building out those long-term ALM platform strategies. And again, we have a long history from a development perspective of not locking you into a particular process or coding language or architecture. We're very much an open, embrace the open source community and enable that as well. Likewise, we see the need for process and policy controls, and what we've had is we're approaching now about 10,000 certified Scrum Masters in Agile methodologies. We do year-round trainings all over the globe. We're available to do Agile corporate coaching. We'll talk about hybrid combinations of what forms of Agile can you adopt, can be incorporated into your processes, and we can get into supporting some of the hybrid Agile initiatives that are coming out there. So we're on the cutting edge of adopting the tools and the platforms that allow the cultures to change to become more Agile, and not just the culture of the development teams, but the culture of the whole business, so that the business becomes more of an optimal environment. And here's some of the logos. We have a growing list of customers. Large organizations, DISA is a Department of Defense, IS group. The Department of Defense teams have really built some innovative solutions around code sharing with security levels and roles and rights capability. Very intriguing. In terms of our corporate environments, we've got many organizations that are managing tens of thousands of developers with a single platform, and they can incorporate the outsourcing of development, so the source code becomes their assets under management while the development teams are being employed to work on projects themselves. Again, who's CollabNet? Well, CollabNet is really built around, our core is built around the collaborative development effort, our long histories in that space. More recently, we've been kind of a champion leader in the Agile initiatives to really speed up the development process, get to a best practice positions, and the adoptions in the cloud. What we see out there in the cloud environments is historically being able to design and push out to the clouds with design for destination capability, so that as much knowledge we can about the environments that you're developing to can be incorporated into the development efforts. So again, we've got over 7,000 customers in around 90 countries in the world, really working in and with the cloud to enable the innovation that the business is really looking for. And at this point, I'm going to let Julie kind of walk us through in terms of what would this look like in our environment. How do we really transition from this, from a historical ALM perspective, and adopt and incorporate much of the innovation that's going on around us?
Okay, great. Thanks, Paul. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the CollabNet solution for these DevOps initiatives that we're seeing out there that our customers are trying to handle with technology. So traditionally with Agile ALM, as you know, we talk about collaboration between the business and development. And what we'd like to do now for the ability to work effectively not only in software development with Agile initiatives, but also to then be able to work with operations to successfully deploy these applications that are being created more quickly, is to really extend that Agile ALM lifecycle through all the way out through the deployment phase. And you'll see here with this slide that we have a variety of tools that CollabNet provides that helps you to actually bring operations into that conversation for effective collaboration now, not only with business and development, but with operations as well. And then to also automate some of those deployment tasks that are typically manual handoffs, so that you're reducing or completely eliminating the manual steps in the handoff process to operations. Now, the cloud is a key component to all of this. As you see, typically in Agile ALM today, there's a huge need for continuous build and test, and typically what organizations are finding in that development life cycle is that the need for hardware becomes, there's a greater need for more hardware, or there are needs for hardware that change constantly. So we do have this concept of an elastic provisioning that's going to allow teams to utilize new build and test servers as needed, and have that those servers all be controlled by a central pool of servers and automatically accessed by the continuous integration environment. We're going to extend that same concept out through to deployment as well, so that you can deploy to a private or public cloud as needed. And you'll notice that CollabNet TeamForge is key to all of this, the entire life cycle, because of the what CollabNet TeamForge provides is a central repository for all of the assets that are stored, and then the continuous integration servers can access the assets as needed from CollabNet TeamForge. And I want to talk just a little bit about each of those components. So again, I don't want a product pitch here, but I do need to at least talk about the different components. So let me actually just quickly talk about ScrumWorks Pro. ScrumWorks Pro is an agile planning and tracking tool that really allows for robust agile planning needs across projects, across programs, especially with when you're working on multiple releases simultaneously. It does give you comprehensive reporting to allow organizations to work effectively and see how they're doing against their agile plan. ScrumWorks Pro is tightly integrated with CollabNet TeamForge. And CollabNet TeamForge is our central development platform that allows all team members, whether they're from the business, development, or operations, to work effectively together. So it gives you all of the tools you need for software development and effective collaboration with role-based access controls built in. This is going to allow people to see in real time all of the data they need to see in terms of what the plan is for a particular product release, how people are doing against the plan for an iteration or that release, what development obstacles are in the way or any impediments that need to be overcome, any development work that is progressing, defects that are being fixed, and it also allows operations to see the complete bill of materials for a release once it is created. It allows them to see the complete development environment details, to have any questions answered about that environment, and see the applications that need to be deployed as well. And CollabNet TeamForge has complete web service APIs available, so you can integrate with your other tools that are typically needed in an enterprise environment, and that includes any tools that operations are typically using for deployment. Now, of course, as we talk about development, it's important that the developers themselves are using the tools that they're accustomed to. So all of the data that's stored in CollabNet TeamForge, all of your development assets and activity, can be accessed by the developers through their tool of choice. Typically, that's their Visual Studio or Eclipse IDE. And CollabNet provides desktops for these IDEs to allow the developers to access all of the TeamForge data right through that IDE. And then finally, we need to talk about continuous integration, very important on the development side. I touched on this a little bit already, but As you're creating new software, developers are checking in changes for bug fixes or for new features throughout each iteration. It's important that those changes are built frequently so that any problems can be diagnosed early on. We do have continuous integration implementation with Hudson that is tightly integrated with CollabNet TeamForge for both things like permission systems and for writing data from the continuous integration server back to CollabNet TeamForge so that, again, TeamForge acts as a central repository for not only the executables but any build issues that are seen throughout the development process. So as we have the development work being built by the continuous integration server, it will be the build results will be uploaded to CollabNet TeamForge, and any build issues will be logged as well. With the lab management integration to continuous integration, and I'll talk about lab management a bit more in just a moment, but with that integration, that also allows you to elastically provision new builds and test servers as needed throughout the continuous integration process. So let's talk a little bit more about lab management now. Lab management is the CollabNet module that allows you to really have central control over all of your build and test servers. It's tightly integrated with this cloud concept. You can manage public and private clouds within lab management, or hybrid clouds that contain both public cloud servers from a cloud like Amazon EC2 and your own private cloud servers. They can all be centrally managed, and development teams, as needed, can provision a new server for their build and test needs from the lab management console, and then hand that server back off to the central pool once they're done using it. You can set restrictions on those servers so that teams can only access a certain subset of servers or only access them for a certain amount of time. And there's complete reporting on those servers as well so that you can see what development teams are utilizing, what percentage of servers, and you can see how much those servers in general are being accessed and utilized. That allows you to streamline and plan better for server use in the future. Now, lots of times what people want to do is they want to automatically hand off or automatically deploy software once the development is done, and the same lab management concepts can be used for automated deployment into the cloud as well onto a production server. Of course, lab management, just like TeamForge, has full APIs available so that you can integrate and incorporate any additional enterprise change management or production provisioning tools that you need with CollabNet TeamForge and lab management. So that's all that I wanted to say today. Let me just go back to this original slide here. This one. So you can see that by having a central platform for all of your team members to work with, whether they're in business, development, or operations, and by having full visibility and traceability of how development is progressing and those handoffs to operations, you really can collaborate more effectively and streamline this whole DevOps initiative, streamline the communications between development and operations moving forward. All right, and with that, I think we're ready to hand it back over to take questions.
Sure, great, thanks. You guys, a great presentation. I think a lot of people got a lot out of this on a better idea of what DevOps is all about and what are some of the challenges. Hey, so don't forget, if you have any questions, go ahead and use the event chat window down below this screen here. And first question we have for you guys is, what do you suggest for evaluating a development firm in terms of DevOps efficiency? Any ideas?
So when you're talking about the development firm as an outside organization, I think when you're really looking at them or evaluating, it isn't necessarily about time to completion. It's really about the quality of the work and the impact it has over the whole life cycle. So when you measure development, whether it's insourcing or outsourcing, you really want to look at the impact the operational team's having, how the business is leveraging the release effort or the service that it's providing. What we know from analysts' research is that a typical application is only 8% in the project stage, and the cost of that application, 92% of the support costs will be accrued out in the operational environment. So relative to development, if you're just looking at how cheap or how fast things can be developed, it isn't really an optimal way of looking at it. That's really a project-centric view of the world, and what you want to take is a more DevOps view. What is the benefit to the business, and how supportable and sustainable is it to the IT ops group? And do you have the traceability to go back and to identify what should be reused in terms of source code and what should be reused in terms of best use of talent, the people that are working together in those teams? Does that help?
I think it does. I think it's helpful. And so another question then, too. So do you have any suggestions for tools that people should consider when getting started?
So what's funny is the tools question really has to do with the maturity of the organization itself. And again, relative to a DevOps vision, the whole development effort really has been kind of the underdeveloped of all the three disciplines. It's really developed around the tools for individuals and the team members, and now pulling into more corporate alignment and lining up with the business. What we find is the optimal amount of change can be recognized in a first year if you focus on the ALM space. Obviously, it's the place we're in, but we'd see, in some cases, we've seen a 70% improvement in the speed in which projects get done because of the visibility, the collaboration between the development teams and the code reuse just amongst the team itself. And as you start to expand the collaboration capabilities between the two other groups, you tend to see that the long sustained efficiencies pushing all the way up to the business.
All right, got it. So any best practices maybe you can share with our audience?
Yeah, some interesting ones. From a best practice, from a general perspective, there's been a tremendous amount of money spent on BI and dashboarding tools that give visibility upwards to managers and to executives from within the silos or those disciplines. Really what needs to be reinvested is that knowledge and expertise. The KPIs that really feed upwards need to be shared laterally across the organizations between the dev and the ops teams. And again, it really depends on the maturity of both of those organizations and what is leverageable and what is discoverable relevant to the activities of both of those. But the technologies and the investments for understanding how your environment, both on the dev and on the ops side of the house, is currently running, that is incredible technology and innovation that can be shared laterally to help the collaboration capabilities and automate the handoffs between those two disciplines.
All right. So as they're sharing this information, what types of business benefits can they expect?
So from a DevOps perspective, the goal is efficiency of the whole organization. So starting a project in an optimal state and getting it so that optimally it can be supported and sustained to grow the business itself. So the efficiency gain of the whole organization needs to be the focus of a DevOps effort. Relative to IT operations, they're looking for a system of getting good quality innovation that is not disruptive to the system availability issues that they have out there. They're looking for a stable environment in which innovation can be introduced systematically with the train of changes coming from agile development efforts that doesn't disrupt them. Likewise, how do you optimize both local and distributed teams to develop at the most efficient way possible from a development perspective? How do we make development as agile as possible, whether or not using a waterfall methodology that's being optimized or you're using a true agile Scrum process? How do we make it so that those teams are given as much visibility into the destinations and the requirements so that they can be working on projects that are not having to be reworked or are inappropriate for either the business or IT itself? And at the end of the day, what they're looking for is giving the business the capability to build around their business agility, make it core to the strategy itself. What you want to do is you want to give the business every advantage to be successful, And to be able to innovate in a very quality-centered way is really what's driving the whole DevOps effort.
Alrighty, so why do you think this is the right time to think about DevOps?
From a maturity perspective, there have been a tremendous amount of innovations within each of the silos itself. Those silos have optimized to the point where they're now working against some of the other, and it's becoming obvious that the optimization for an independent silo, when it works against the other two, starts to hurt the business. And so what we're seeing now is the natural progression of the maturity of those individual silos now realizing that the interdependency of both of those activities need to be blended together so that the business can be given its best opportunity to grow. So I just think that before this, if there was ever an attempt to do DevOps, you're talking about spaghetti string connections and integrations are too inefficient and not sustainable or scalable. But I think with a lot of the automation capabilities and a lot of the capabilities within the disciplines, they can now be integrated together to give you traceability, accountability, and to really measure and get metrics on the improvement to the organizations that we did not have those potentials before.
Okay, well, Paul, what do you think if when someone starts to review their organization, what do you think they can expect to find?
You know, I think what is a challenge for a DevOps initiative review is to really look at the tools and the platforms that are currently in place. Do they scale and are they sustainable? Who's making the decisions and what capabilities, what criteria was kind of elicited when the decisions were made? I think that's really the challenge for a DevOps effort is to really assess your current environment, the maturity of both your apps, your ops, and the business capability to take those change requests in a systematic process and to roll them out there. So all the tools exist right now inside of every organization. Are they the right tools? It's a challenge because you've got to ask the questions. Do they scale? Do they sustain? Are they going to blend in? Do they have the APIs, the SDKs to do the integration capabilities? Can they both give and take information? Can you configure them around the way that you do business? So from an assessment perspective, your organization has either a mature or not a set of tools that are allowing your organization to sustain or to kind of to be where it's at. Now the question is, are those tools the right ones?
All righty. Well, I think it's been a great presentation. We're just about out of time here. So any last thoughts do you want to share with the audience before we get going?
I think from a DevOps perspective, it's a brand new initiative. I think it's really going to give the business what it's looking for. Aligning it up with corporate and strategic activities is what IT has historically not been aligned with in terms of running IT like a business. IT is not a business unto itself. It's really a service organization to the business. So really have a quality-driven I guess, innovative capability. So to be able to enhance or to drive what we call the quality-driven business agility is the goal of DevOps. It's not to make one practice or one discipline kind of king of the hill. It's really to take a more holistic approach to helping the business grow, helping it to be optimal in a very cost-sensitive environment, and how to leverage the efficiencies of not one organization or one practice, but the efficiencies of the whole organization together.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Paul, and thanks, Julie, for joining me again today. It's been a great presentation. I'm glad to have you join us.
Thanks, Patrick. We appreciate the opportunity.
Great. Thanks, Patrick.
Sure. Well, if you'd like to learn more about CollabNet, you can visit them on the web at www.collabnet.com or collab.net. And again, if you'd like to see more webcasts like this, just come back to the Agile Journal. It's agilejournal.com/webcasts. And I look forward to seeing you on our next presentation. Goodbye, everyone, and thanks to everyone who helped put this on. So long.